okay, which is the Hakdama, the Shaarei Yosher of Rosh Shimon Shkop. And what he's developed is the following. He says, he opens up, I'm just going to review what we've done. He opens up and says that the idea is we're supposed to walk in God's ways. Okay? Halacha b'drachav, we're supposed to emulate God. And what's the ultimate definition of God? The ultimate definition of God, he doesn't use this language, but basically he's a tov u'meitiv. In a sense that God doesn't need anything, therefore everything he does is for the benefit of others. Right? And that's God's whole relationship to the creation is for the purposes of benefiting the creation. Right? It's a classic argument why did Kodesh Baruch Hu create humanity? In order to be able to give humanity the good, which basically has to be through man earning the good. Okay, so therefore the ultimate good is when you earn the ultimate good, and therefore God gave us the opportunity to earn the ultimate good. Okay. And he says that's connected to Kedoshim Tiyu, the idea of being Kodesh, which we also is a statement that we're supposed to emulate God in terms of Kedoshim Tiyu, that he's Kodesh. Because he's Kodesh, Mahata Kodesh, therefore just like he's Kodesh, we should be Kodesh. The point is that he starts out by bringing a medrash that says, can you really be as Kodesh as a Kodesh Baruch Hu? No, because God's holiness, Kedusha, is above above humanity's ability to be Kodesh. So his concept is that it implies that God's Kedusha, I'm going to use the word Kedusha, I don't like using the word holy because holy has connotations within English we really are not applicable to Kedusha. But he says God's Kedusha is a higher form of Kedusha, and therefore we're supposed to be Kodesh like God, but we can never be really Kodesh like God because God's Kedusha is beyond us. So therefore he raises the following issue. What is Kedusha? So he says that the Ramban says that Kedusha is really precious, is separation. Okay? You separate from things that you want. Right? So that he says, for example, the person who is a glutton, right? But he only eats kosher food. So he's a glutton. So the Ramban says that person is what's called a novel b'rshus Torah. He's disgusting within the boundaries of Torah because he's actually following the letter of the law. He's actually being halachic, but he's missing the point that there's something that's wrong about being a glutton because you're not showing any restraint. And there's an idea of Kedusha is being parish, is being putting some restrictions on yourself. And he says the idea being is that you have a desire you have desires, and Kedusha is by putting some type of limitation upon your desires. That's what makes you Kodesh. Okay. Now, he therefore develops an idea that this idea of Kedusha has an idea of considering others. Okay, that's an aspect of it. Since God is always considering of others, you should also, in your desire for your own benefit, should consider others. Okay, but he points out, and this is where he sort of gets off. He says, but this concept of limiting your desires is the way for Kedusha. He says that really has a problem if you're going to apply to God, because God doesn't have any desires. So how can you say, if you say Kedusha is that perception of controlling your desires, the point is God doesn't have desires, therefore what does that mean that God is Kodesh? What does it mean God is, if Kodesh is Parish, which means that you are controlling yourself, God doesn't need to control because he doesn't have any desires. So So he says that concept by itself cannot be Kedusha. Okay? So he says, so Kedusha has something to do with helping others. Okay. So then you can develop the idea that Kedusha is when you do for others. But that also is not Parish. Right? The fact is, okay, so you control yourself so you have more to help others. So you sit there and say, if you're not a glutton and you're not trying to stuff all this food in your mouth, you have a little bit to share with a friend. Okay? But the point is that still developing this idea from your desires, it really doesn't relate to, it doesn't connect totally with God. So he says, so you want to say that God is just giving, you're just concerned about others. But he basically says, but that can't be the model for human beings either. Why can't it be the model for human beings? Because human beings have to be concerned about themselves. So that's where he gets to this point here. He says, okay, we threw out this concept of Parish, that you have to control your desires. That can't be that's how the Ramban defines Kedusha. It seems to have something to do with Kedusha. God, you can't really apply that concept to God. What he's going to throw out in the concept of God is one of totally giving. Okay, so therefore, being Parish and being separate seems to have some idea of necessity. In order to care for others, you have to put some restraint on yourself in order to be able to take care for others. But how is that similar to God? What's the relationship to God? What's the connection to God? Okay? Okay. So the point is, he says that God is above, his Kedusha is above all things. So we're going to go to, if you look on the, I'm going to go to page 4. Okay, it starts Amnam. Okay, we'll start from there. Okay.
Do you have any extras?
Sorry, missing one, so or you have to share. Okay. Okay. Amnam, im yomer ha'adam v'achnias tivo legia l'mida yisera ad shelo yeh b'nafsho shum machshava she'epo le'hitiv latzmo. So he says basically he's throwing out this idea that he's throwing out the idea that what you must say in terms of God, since he doesn't need to control himself, is it's a concept of totally caring about others. That must be the concept of Kedusha. That must be this aspect of Kedusha. Okay? And in that way, we really can't be like God, because we can't be totally lacking of ourselves. But he says, but a person who decides that he's going to try and reach this Madrega, okay, he says, if God's holy, I'm going to try to be holy. If God's going to be Kodesh, I'm going to be Kodesh. And now he's saying that Kodesh is totally caring for others, right? So he says, that he won't have any concern for himself. Okay, and they only be concerned for others. And this is the way he'll become Kodesh like God. Because God is only interested in benefiting others. He doesn't do anything for himself because he has no needs. So you'd say, hey, listen, this must be what it means to emulate God. Be totally selfless. Right? Okay. Okay. And this must be the idea that Kedusha is trying to be as selfless as you can be. No, you can't be totally selfless, but you try and be as selfless as you can be. That would be that simple idea, because that's the way you would emulate God, who is totally selfless. But Chazal is saying that God's holiness is above yours, is different than yours, is basically saying that this can't be it. Because really we should not emulate God totally in this regard. Now, that would seem to say, listen, because you can't do it, what?
We have need.
Right. So therefore, since you can't do it the full 100 yards, like you can't do it the full 100% like God, so you do it to the best you do. But you still seem to imply that selflessness is going to be the idea. Okay. The point of what I really want to do here is I want to show you the shift that he's going to develop here in terms of an idea. It's going to start with a question. Okay. Okay. Okay, the fact of the matter is, it sounds very simple. God is selfless, therefore you should be you should be selfless. Oh, you can't be totally selfless, so you should be as selfless as you can. Great. So that every interest that you have for yourself would be bad, according to that idea. Right? Now, he's going to he's going to now take it the other way. Okay? He's totally, God's only interested in others, nothing to himself. Nothing changes in terms of God, because therefore he doesn't do anything for himself, it's always done for others. Therefore he only wishes to benefit others. But that can't be his idea for us. Shaarei Yosher Rabbi Akiva Chayecha Kodem. Rabbi Akiva has already taught us the concept of Chayecha Kodem, right? That your life has to go first. That's the famous case of the bottle of water in the desert. Two people. The guy who has the bottle of water keeps it, and he can't share if it's going to take away his own life, right? If only one person,
or something,
well, if only
old and young.
No, it's who has the bottle. If you have one bottle of water, if one person will survive with the bottle of water, you split the water, both won't survive. Okay. So the point is, what should you do? If it's your bottle of water, you have to keep it. That's Chayecha Kodem. Okay. Okay, but he also says this is why they developed the concept that love your neighbor as yourself. It becomes don't do to another what you don't want done for yourself. It sort of says you really can't love your neighbor as yourself, because there's also self-love is obviously going to be greater than any love you have for another. Okay? Okay? But he says it seems to be that there's the obligation to place your needs first. Now, what has he done here? What he's done is something that many people are afraid of in the learning process. It's something which really ties into what we're talking about in terms of questions. Generally, people throw out a general principle, or concept, or idea, or value, or ethic. And then a question arises which basically challenges that ethic. And a lot of times, people are afraid of the challenge. They think that the challenge is going to totally destroy the ethic. It's going to totally bring it down. The point is while you're in the state of the question, there's a strong possibility that it will constantly bother you. That's why we're talking about the concept of living with questions. The fact is that living with questions means you're constantly dealing with issues that you may not have an answer for, and therefore the ethics seem to be really problematic. So therefore you have an ethical idea thrown out. And a lot of times a question will come and seem to totally undermine that ethic, and you become very concerned of how you're going to live with the question. The point is that if you don't ask the question, you're going to suffer from not really understanding the real underlying ethic. And that's something that has happened here, that he's done over here in very powerful terms. His argument up to this point in time makes a lot of sense. Right? God is totally selfless. Right? We are to emulate God. He says we are to limit ourselves through precious, and that seems to be tied to Kedusha. but our Kedusha can never be equal to God's Kedusha, because so he says, to understand that, it must mean that holiness is selflessness, caring for others. Okay? God doesn't have any self-interest, doesn't do anything for himself, for his own benefit. Therefore, it's part of his very nature to be selfless, because there's no self-need. But that's the ideal we should strive for. So our self-interest becomes the evil inclination, which it is according to certain religious perspectives, and our idea should be to be as selfless as we can be. And when it says we can't be perfectly selfless like God, it's because we still have that self-interest, and if we don't concern our self-interest, we won't take care of ourselves. But we have certain self-interest that we're stuck with. But really, the ideal is to be as selfless as possible. Now, the truth is that there are read once of a Eastern mystical religious grouping that the highest level for their holy person reaches the highest level when he goes out to the center of the village or the city, and he sits down and never moves again. That's it. Sits down, and that's it. He will die there. Okay? Doesn't eat, doesn't drink, doesn't get up to go to the washroom. That's it. Sits there. Why? Because of total lack of any self. Therefore, there's total lack of any self-interest. Okay? So now, the fact is what Shkop is doing here is saying, wait a second. Okay, there's a problem with saying, okay, of course we have to have a little bit of self-interest, because we can't exist without it. So people say, yeah, okay, so you try and minimize your self-interest. But he says, wait a second. There's actually a value in self-interest. Because Rabbi Akiva said, Chayecha Kodem. You have to take care of yourself. Okay? V'ahavta l're'echa kamocha is understood that it starts with your own self-love. So now he says, wait a second. The model can't be selflessness. Yeah, God's selfless, but that God is totally a different being. In terms of ourselves, God has also said to us, you have to be concerned about yourself. So if you have to be concerned about yourself, you can't be selfless. Yeah.
Two questions. First of all, Hashem concerns for himself because he needs a concern. But we say on the seventh day, Hashem rested. Right? What does that mean? We can't understand what that means, but in a sense, isn't that Hashem taking care of himself? And on a second point, we have Shabbos every week where we sit and we stuff our face. Right? And we have Purim coming up, and we have, every holiday that we ever have.
The fact is that that's exactly it. The fact is that the selfless, in other words, he's created a little bit of a paper tiger. You're right about that. The truth of the matter is that God rested on the seventh day. We have no idea what does that mean. Basically, he created a model for us that he rests on the seventh day, whatever that means. Okay, the point is that God's behavior really was a model for our existence, but it's not really in his being.
So if it's a model for our existence, then even more so. So why is Hashem resting? Hashem is resting to just that we need a rest.
Okay.
Self-care.
So you're right. So the point is you're giving other arguments. You're giving other arguments for self-interest. The fact is that there's a concept on Shabbos when we talk about the mitzvahs that say Shabbos. An important one is Oneg Shabbos, which is pleasure on Shabbos. And there's a mitzvah to have pleasure on Shabbos, which obviously means that there is to be self-interest. And the fact is you're just throwing out another argument that shows that there's a value in self-interest, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mitzvah that you should have self-interest. Therefore, and that's what he's really saying here. He's introducing the idea, wait a second, if selflessness is the ideal, but there's another value that is presented by Torah also that says that there should be self-interest. Therefore, selflessness cannot be the ultimate value. You're absolutely correct.
How can selflessness actually exist? Even Hashem, even according to, I guess, the Rambam's idea of Hashem doing something, he obviously, unless I'm misinterpreting, he does it because he loves us. Like that has a selfishness.
His love.
But it's still. It's not like I don't think there's anything selfless.
Okay, so that's a classical question. Okay, it's the issue of altruism, where it says that altruism is a great value, but the point is that you're driven to be altruistic.
Right.
Okay, when people say it is better to give than to receive, what you're really saying is that you have more pleasure from giving than receiving, but really it's your own interest in giving. I mean, the fact is and this is something that a lot of people don't fully recognize, and you see it with the maternal drive, that there are certain situations where they find cases of women who were pregnant and lost their babies, and then they go try and kidnap someone else's baby because they're so driven to take care of a child that, and when they take care of that child, they actually take care of the child, but they're driven to care for the child. That's why it's interesting in halachic concepts, the parental love is not perceived to be selfless in that regard, because the fact is that your care for your children is motivated by is really tied to your drive that you care for your children, so that you are right.
Leave their children like.
That's very rare.
It's not all, but it's
no,
not an all feeling of a woman that wants that. Depends on what their mind is, where they're
right.
Where
not everyone has that.
You know?
Not
you wake up
everyone has
4
that
times
drive.
a night for 5 years. See how well you can keep an eye on everyone.
Right. I mean, the fact is that the drives that we have, we define them very easily as what's selfless or selfish. It's an interesting thing where they found out with Mother Teresa, right? Everyone looked at Mother Teresa as a very selfless person. She gave up her life to work with the with the lepers in where was it? India, right? But the fact is that there's they found out that one of the things was she was really driven by a desire for a certain spiritual experience that she had, that she wanted to repeat. So the point is that she was driven by a certain spirituality. That doesn't necessarily mean
that's a particular case.
Yeah, but the fact is that there are people who like helping others. They're driven to help others.
There's something in them.
Right. So the terms selfless and selfish are problematic terms. I mean, that's what I think what we're getting at is that you have a desire to help others. I mean, I'm like you take Avram Avinu. Avram Avinu was so driven by helping others that here he was, sick, after the operation with Mila and so forth, and he's sitting there and saying, "When am I going to have guests? I need guests," and so forth. And the fact of the matter is that there's a drive we have to give to others. There's a drive we have to help others. There's, better to give than to receive. And you have a good feeling from it.
Set an example for everyone to.
Right, but he also had it as a drive. It wasn't where he was sitting there and saying, "This is the right thing to do. I better do it." He was really driven to do it. So the truth is, when you talk about what's selfless and what's selfish, it's not easy to really define it so simply. But the point is that there is some concept that is sort of, I think, what Rav is developing here, and this is why this is significant, because it's developing the question, and where he's going to go with this question is a completely different way of looking at the situation. See, what happens is that you have an idea, and then someone throws out a question to you. There's two ways of responding to the idea. One way is by just trying to sort of fix up the idea and try to for the question, but just try to fix up the idea. The other way is this question demands of you to see the whole situation differently. Okay, I'll give you an example from the world. Pursuant to Newton's theory, and I'm not into science, so I'm just sort of telling you what I read. According to Newton's theory, light isn't supposed to bend. It's supposed to be straight. People started seeing that light bent when it ran around the sun, and no one had an explanation for it. Okay, they started seeing, I guess, how they knew it, I don't know, but this was a big problem. Newton's theory was all being messed up. So people started throwing out answers. He said this answer, friend for Newton this way, friend for Newton that way, and so forth. So one guy came around and said, let's just rewrite the whole science. That was Einstein. So Einstein came around and said, let's just wipe it clean. Came up with a whole different system, the theory of relativity. Whole different science. This was Newton's shot. Very nice. We're going with a totally different shot. Okay. It was revolutionary. And Einstein said that, that really he didn't think it was such a big thing they figured out. He says other people could have figured it out either, but they were so locked into Newton's way of thinking that they couldn't come up new. The fact is that that's the difference in certain types of questions. Problems, questions, and so forth. Is a question comes, you have especially in let's say the moral universe, you have ethics and concepts. Question comes and basically you say, whoa. So it blows us away. So how are you going to deal with it? So the first way you deal with it is try and give a forever, right? And usually in that process, you try to limit the question. You try to sort of like avoid dealing with it. You try to sweep it under the rug a little bit and so forth. Or you're for it, and you sit there and say, "This is forever." Oh, you just don't want to see it, but it's like this. But the fact is that sometimes these questions means you have to totally reinvent the wheel. You have to really go through a whole reanalysis, and you have to see things differently, and that's very hard to do. And the fact is you have to think through these things very hard. The fact is that in those years when they saw the light was bending and people were still having problems with the way they tried to answer up Newton's ideas, it was the people who basically said, I gotta live with the problem, I gotta live with the question. They're the guys who, that's basically what Einstein did. He basically said, listen, I just can't buy this, there's something wrong here. And therefore they had to try and see things anew. That really is, I think that's fundamental within the Torah consciousness. Okay, the whole idea of Torah is Chiddush, in the Chidushim. It's a certain type of Chiddush. It is not a total rejection of the system. It's not like you totally drop everything and so forth and so forth, but it's a Chiddush within the system. But usually it comes about through working through the ideas. And usually it comes about by living within the ideas. So that's something that I think is happening here. That's a very worthwhile idea here. Shmushkov opens up by saying, okay, there's a concept of God being tov v'meitiv. Okay, he thinks that that's the basis of kedusha. We're told to be porish. We're told to control our drives. It means to allow a place for others. It means that, you know, control your drives and don't just think about yourself. Okay, that's great, good, but you really can't be like God, because God is totally concerned about others. Therefore, you can't be like it because you're human. But you should try and be as totally unconcerned about others as you can. So it sort of develops this idea, and so forth and so forth, that if you walk around and say that tzaddik is the one who's totally selfless, and so forth and so forth. This is the idea of being a tzaddik, and so forth. Okay, it's very, very nice. Then Shmushkov says, but wait a second. Throw another value. Chayachem kodem. Which means you gotta place yourself first. That's a value. Whoa. That totally blows up. And your idea from Shabbos and your idea from that, well, it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't connect that way. You know, it was an interesting story, but I told someone about how Moshe Feinstein used to go for soda with his wife. Okay, there's a small biography of Rav Moshe that was written by his son-in-law, Rav Moshe Tendler. It's in a book of translations of some medical tshuvas of Rav Moshe. And Rabbi Tendler opens up with a biography of Rav Moshe.
Rabbi Tendler Sr.?
Rabbi Tendler Sr. Rabbi Dr. Moshe Tendler. And he says, basically, that Rav Moshe used to go, used to go out to go for a walk with his wife, to go over for a soda. Right? He used to spend time with his wife. So I told this story to someone, and so forth and so forth, and he told it to someone else. The other person he told it to couldn't believe it. What? Moshe go out for a soda with his wife? Built a Torah? What, he went out with his wife? Go out for a soda? So he asked me, he says, can I get the source? I said, yeah, here's the source. The fact is that there's like, you know, a whole variety of other stories of that nature. You know, the point is that that's because a romantic relationship between husband and wife is also a value. A romantic relationship. There's a famous story that when I think it was Rabbi Akiva Eger's wife passed away. Was it Rabbi Akiva Eger, the husband? I think it was Rabbi Akiva Eger's wife passed away. A few months after his wife passed away, someone wrote him with a shidduch, and Rabbi Akiva never responded to the letter. Okay, just never responded. So the guy saw him. A little while later, another letter. A little while later, I think the guy met him and said, "Ooh, I had a shidduch for you. Why, you never got back to me." And he says, "You got the letter?" He said, "Yeah." And something like this. So supposedly Rukia wrote him a letter back and said, "My wife passed away." You know what that means? Like I'm not there. I'm not even thinking of it. I mean, what are you talking about? The fact is it's like there's other aspects of life that people don't recognize. So the point is that I heard one gadol of the previous generation said that people find it very hard pressed to find sources to this effect, showing the importance of the romantic relationship between husband and wife. And his idea and his response was, it was such a davar pashut, it was so obviously important that no one felt they had to write it down. 1 + 1 = 2. I mean, you know that already. But the fact is that that's why you don't find them writing about it, because it was like, You don't have to tell me to eat in the morning. You know. Anyways, the point is that it's so interesting that people have certain ideas and so forth, and then they confront another idea. But the point is when they confront this other idea, then what happens is that you have to figure out how do you integrate it, how do you really reconnect it, and that's what living with questions is about. But the fact is you have to know your question. Now over here, Rav Shimon Shkrop is presenting a classic presentation of what I would consider the process of Judaism, the process of Torah. Presents an idea, sounds like a very nice idea. Kodesh Baruch Hu, totally giving, so forth and so forth, right? We should all try and be selfless, very, very nice, perfect. Bingo, chayecha kodem. There's a value in selfishness. Not only that, but you have to place yourself above others. That's clearly totally different. So how do I reconcile the two? And then what he's going to do is come up with a completely different model than what you would consider to be the simple, selfish model. He's going to come up with what I think to be somewhat of a different model of how you should look at life. Okay? A little bit differently. Now, we also touched upon these ideas a little bit ourselves. Because the fact is when you mention that the concept of what is selfish and what is a drive and so forth, when you talk about the maternal drive being selfish, I mean, the fact is that's a crazy statement. I mean, in Christian thought, the maternal drive is considered to be the most selfless drive. That's why in Christianity the Virgin Mary, Mother Mary, is so funny, because it's the ideal of selflessness and parenting, and that's why the model is constantly parenting. But what you're pointing out is that your drive to care also is you have to have that drive to care. If it's not part of your psyche to be driven like this, then you're not going to do it. So therefore, there's no such thing as something being totally selfless.
What's the Hebrew word for selfless?
Come to me. Let's see, he doesn't have it.
Because there is no redundancy. Is how the whole idea of selfless existing at all.
Right. On the other hand, if you think the other way, the fact is that now, is there actually a thing of total selfishness? That's going to be something else also. The fact of the matter is I'll let you think about that. Is there really a possibility of total selfishness?
Well, wouldn't there be?
The fact is that in a certain way, the self, if you're saying, what you're saying is the self doesn't exist in a vacuum. Self exists in this. Therefore, if I care for others, it must be that I have a drive to care for others. But the fact is, at the same point in time, if I exist in a communal setting, then my actions aren't really able to be totally devoid of the effect upon others. Right?
So why does that negate the selfishness?
That's I didn't say negates it.
Right.
Okay? I'm saying that the fact is that if you start thinking in a communal setting, things become very different. Like, for example, let me give you an example. And I'm not saying this affects the drive, but let me give you an example.
Socialist healthcare?
No, I'm going to think one of the cheshbonos, the Gemara says, one of the cheshbonos the Kodesh Baruch Hu has when he considers the punishment of an individual is who will be affected by that punishment. Okay, so if someone else will feel anguish over this person going through this situation, then the fact is, if that other person feeling anguish is not deserving of feeling that anguish, Kodesh Baruch Hu won't punish the first person. So the fact is that there's an idea that if what happens to you affects others, it's it's a factor in the Kodesh Baruch Hu's cheshbonos. So the point is that there's an idea that you don't live in a vacuum. Okay?
So you're saying one's like mistake or effect or something that they took on was negative, and it ends up affecting those around them.
Right.
The ones around them are not
right.
punished for it. You're saying just.
Well, no. What I'm saying is that it could that would be the person is the effects upon a person. If other people have empathy for that person, that would also be in the cheshbon of Kodesh Baruch Hu. But the point is, who understands cheshbon of Kodesh Baruch Hu anyways? But the point is that it's a
people around them then feel for this person,
right,
and
right.
went whatever.
That's true.
To make whatever.
Right. I mean, the fact is that nothing exists in a total vacuum. I mean, the fact is that they point out, for example, that if you eat, then your parent feels good that you had a nice meal. You know what I mean? Like, that something nice happened to you, right? So the point is that you've done something that was totally motivated by your own, let's say what you would call selfish drive, but the truth of the matter is there's an inherent reaction to it because someone who cared about you is happy to hear that you had this positive experience. Okay, so the point is that we don't live in a vacuum. So that's something that's going to come up. But the fact is that the model of selfless is a simple model in many people's ethical systems. Right? Good is selfless and bad is selfish. But the fact is that in many ways that definition is inherently problematic.
Right.
Because the point is that you're driven to do good. You do have self-interest. Sometimes, if you don't have self-interest, then the repercussions are going to be very negative for you. And the fact is that there's also chesed for yourself. Okay, you should take care of yourself as well. So if you're caring about people, you're also a human being, right? One of the ways I understand the Gemara about the one bottle of water in the desert is that you basically understand that there are two human beings here. So if you remove yourself from an objective viewpoint and say it's two human beings, only one can survive. Who survives? Okay, so we take the objective standard, the one who has the bottle, right? I guess property becomes a factor in that regard. But the fact is, because if you didn't have that factor, what other factor would you use? But the point is that you're looking at things a certain way. Now, a lot of times, there's a story about there was a Catholic priest who became a saint under the previous pope, right? The previous pope was from Poland, right? John Paul II was from Poland.
It was the guy, the German guy who resigned.
No, you're right. The guy before him. You're right. It was a guy before him who was from Poland, and he made a Polish priest who died during the Holocaust into a saint. And what this Polish priest did was a Nazi soldier was about to kill a Polish peasant, and the priest stepped forward and says, if you're going to kill someone, kill me and not him. So the Nazi said, okay. So he shot the priest, right? And he let that Polish peasant live. So there was a whole big thing. If I remember correctly, there was a whole big thing when they made this priest into a saint, and the peasant who was saved was actually at the ceremony, right? Because he was very grateful for life. Okay, and this was told. the point is, from a halachic perspective, really, halachically, Chayecha Kodmin would say you can't do that. Okay? The point being, though, is a certain level. What happens is that forget the fact that the individual, it's two human beings. Human being A, human being B. And if you look at the Gemara when it talks about all the issues, when it says about, if I go to you, if I put a gun to you and say, kill him or I'll kill you, right? You have to say, no, right? Because who says that his blood, who says that your blood is worth more than his? But on the other hand, Tosfos points out that if someone comes up to you and says, listen, I just want you to lie there. I'm going to take you up and throw you onto a baby, okay, and kill the baby, or kill another person using you as the object, then you can let the person do it. Why you may have to let the person do it? Why? Because who says the other person's blood is worth more than you? What the Gemara is really saying is, on a certain level, there's an objectivity of human beings. It's not you and the other. Selfishness says, I'm more important than you. Selflessness says, you're more important than me. There's another level. We're both equal. Okay? And it's equality of humanity. Right? So the truth is that case of Shvichas Dam, in that case in terms of murder, is the equality of humanity, the equality of all human beings. So the point is you start dealing with much more complex things. Now what happens is when you start asking questions, you start breaking down the concepts, you start opening up these concepts, and then the challenge is now putting it all together again in terms of a system. It's very similar to the science model I told you before. And yeah, start having problems with Newton. What are we going to do? Well, luckily Newton's laws work in this world, so we're not worried about the light bending so much right now. But the fact is we live with this way. But the point is we have to sit there and say, okay, what's this new system? How are we going to understand it? But the questions open up the possibility of getting that new system.
But isn't there a danger, and like you said with Newton's theory, and then with light bending, and there was an issue, so they threw out the system, they started from scratch, and that's how they got you a new idea.
Einstein did. Well,
so you can't really do that.
No. I'm not saying no. They didn't throw out the system. Because when you study science in high school, okay, you're still studying Newton. Many years ago when I was in science in high school, I was a chemistry major for a little while. But the fact is that still. But the point is that when you talk in terms of science, they don't teach theory of relativity because you want to understand it. So they still teach Newton, so you understand certain concepts of.
Well, on a basic, on the level you'll deal with pretty much all your life.
Exactly.
Relativity doesn't.
And that also happens. That happens to many people within halacha as well. The fact of the matter is, you can use these models because they work for most people. The fact is that for other people, they raise the question. What usually happens is people then try to defend the models and sort of like, no, let's not ask the question. But for some people, the question is so there, and they understand the problems of the models, and the fact is they never go on. And that's perhaps what we're trying to do here. Rav Shimon Shkop is going to say, okay, he's going to develop a new model. Yeah.
My question about psychopaths is kind of answered by that, because one of the tests they do to test if you're a psychopath is a train problem. You're going on a train, in front of you there's 5 people, on another track is 1 person, and you're the lineman. Right. And do you divert it or do you let it go? And pretty much everybody says, okay, you go one way, and then apparently you'll push someone off a bridge in front of a train, he'll die. If you don't push him off, then 5 other people will die. A lot of people have a major issue, but psychopaths are still, push him. It's 1 person versus 5.
Right.
So this thing with we're just looking at numbers here,
Right.
is
The fact
what
is,
a psychopath is, and I guess that's
the fact is that what exists is the coexistence. See, what happens, what makes Torah ultimately complicated is the coexistence of all those factors. There were certain situations that came up. For example, when they used to have dialysis in hospitals, question who gets to go first in terms of dialysis, and there were all these different things. First come, first serve. The president should go first. Your family members should go first. All these different factors of how you should do it. And if you look at the end of the Gemara in Hurrius, they have the whole issue of who goes first, in terms of prioritization and so forth. The fact is the issue becomes ultimately a complex halachic issue in many different cases, because halacha recognizes the value in each one of the yardsticks that are being used. When I see the psychopath, it's what I would say the problem is the fact he doesn't even feel the anxiety of the question. In the end, it's a really tough question. It's a really tough question because of those factors, and it gets into the issue of every human being is a infinite life in its own right. So can you apply concepts of 5 and 1 by human beings? The point is that what happens is that there's a coexistence of all these values at the same time, and yes, when you come to that decision, it's a decision that usually it's going to be a tough decision, but the fact is you're in such turmoil because of feeling, and that's perhaps what you're telling me with the psychopath might not be his conclusion. It might be the very fact that he doesn't see the entire spectrum of possibilities. I mean, one life is different, and then you throw out another question where
the issue most people have was having to do it themselves.
Yeah, I mean, the point is what happens if the one person that will die is someone who you're close to, right? Will you be able to pull that switch, or should you pull that switch? The fact is that might be an issue also. Yeah.
What if the case is, like, that raised my idea from this, is that, like, someone puts a gun to your head, says I'll kill you or 5 other people, so then is your life then more valuable than 5 other people? Like, what
Well,
is
no,
it seems not.
Where if it's one or the other, well,
the fact one or the other, he's doing 1 versus 5.
He's saying what you're saying is, well, the truth is
so
he's saying
is your value
right.
of your life to to save to
right. Or I'll kill you, or I'll
do
kill
something
5
wrong
people.
now.
How does security work from a halachic perspective?
Hmm?
How does security work from a halachic perspective?
It's the fact is these are all factors.
So, Father Sean, let's say you're a soldier and someone throws a grenade in a room with the fellow soldiers. If you jump on it, are you somehow to save your fellow soldiers? Is that somehow violating?
Something. The fact is there was a case like that in Israel. The person was a hero, but the fact is that. It's not simple.
is it considered as if he committed suicide?
No, because he was dead anyway.
No. What the case is that if that would be an issue. Was he
able to escape?
Yeah, but he could have put someone else on.
Well, no.
His life is more important.
You got 2 seconds.
He can do that because that would be something different. The fact is that, but you're raising an issue. If he was going to die anyways, then it would be something different. There's an interesting. It's an interesting case, but the point is that if he wasn't going to die, he sees that there's a thing. He's far enough not to be hurt by it, but he sees something, and if he does this, he'll protect other people from being hurt. The fact is that maybe numbers matter. Maybe it's really not a simple.
Especially in a battle where it could be.
It's not a simple. It's not a simple question. Okay. It really is. But the fact is that in saying it's not a simple question, there's also concerns. There are cases where this has come up, and it's perhaps the challenge, and the truth is that before I actually voice any opinion, I've read about this, but I have to go back and look up some stuff before I actually, being taped here on kosher too. So I don't want to render any theoretical psaks without actually looking inside first. But the fact is that I can only tell you that these are tough issues. I mean, Purim is coming up, right? And there's a whole issue of basically Esther had to basically sleep with Achashverosh to save the Jewish people, right? So it's like, was that tough for her? Absolutely.
And she had to live with him for the rest of her life.
Right. That was absolutely. But the fact is that it's. I mean, and I remember a Rebbe of mine saying this. It was. I remember why you were Rebbe of mine saying this. That it says at the end of the Megillah that Mordechai was respected by Rov Echav, by most of his brethren, not all his brethren. So the classic answer is because he went into politics and he fell in Madrega in the Sanhedrin, right? He was fifth in the Sanhedrin, and he fell to sixth in the Sanhedrin because he couldn't learn as much as he could, and therefore people said, no, you should have resigned from the prime ministership and continue learning. That's a classic answer. But the fact is that this Rebbe said that there were people who said, listen, you shouldn't have sent Esther into Achashverosh. You told Esther, go to Achashverosh. You shouldn't have done it that way. That was wrong. You should have figured out another way. Oh, you didn't know there was another way? So therefore you said, listen, I think the only option here is Esther, go in. You got to go into Achashverosh. Well, maybe you should have not done it that way. So there were people who had ties with him. I mean, the fact is that
I complain too if someone saved my life.
Well,
they say no good deed goes unpunished.
I mean, the fact is that you get into greater complications. I mean, what we've really seen from tonight is just the fact that you have a simple model which many religious people buy. Selfless and selfishness is the simple concepts of morality and ethics and so forth and so forth. The Shemeshkop starts off with the same idea, using Kosh Baruch Hu as the model, and then just says, wait a second, there's another concept called Chayach Kodim. Now, what we're going to see next week is how he's going to develop this other concept that says, hey, this is a real value, and so forth and so forth, and then we're going to see him come up with a different perspective. But the point is that in this thing, well, how do you balance self-interest and self? What really is the value? How do you know when your self-interest is the priority and it's not the priority? And these are tough questions. But the point is that you have to have the question is once you start seeing the complexity of these values and the dialectic, okay, then what happens is dialectic is the two values in conflict with each other. Then you start saying, wait a second, there's a new model that's coming up that might give an answer that allows me to deal with the reality of life a little more seriously.